Welcome to the Ghost of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm McKelly.
Thanks for joining us for episode 3 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. And my notes here have comical misspelling. George Martian.
I was just noticing that.
Poor guy. Today we're discussing... so we're on episode 3, but of course we're out of sync. We're discussing chapter 2 of A Game of Thrones, which is Catelyn 1.
It gets very confusing.
It's going to, I'm going to get fed up of this. But we'll survive.
Right.
So let's start with our usual summary of the chapter. Over to you, McKelly.
All right. Well, the chapter starts with a fairly long digression on how Catelyn feels about the North, Godswoods, and religion. The primary action is when she tells Ned that his mentor and latterly his brother-in-law, Jon Arryn, has died. Ned is clearly upset. Furthermore, King Robert and his giant entourage are ascending on Winterfell, which cheers Ned up at the prospect, despite being a bit put out by how many people were in that party.
Yeah. So, it's not a very long chapter, and
a lot of action.
Not an awful lot of action, no, but it's interesting. I mean, you get the first time that the sort of religious aspects of the world are sort of kicked around a little bit. We meet Catelyn. She's someone that I'm fond of.
Yeah, I'm fond Lady of Winterfell.
Yeah. So she hails from Riverrun. She's part of House Tully. It's interesting to me that she talks about the Godswoods, and that the Godswoods are anachronistic now with the majority faith, which they call just the faith, generally speaking. Yeah. But the major houses kept their Godswoods as something that, even when the old religions were replaced with the new, they felt that the Godswoods was still things they wanted to have, but that only in the North were they still treated as Godswoods rather than just pretty gardens.
Nice parks. Yeah. It's obvious for the Starks it has a deeper meaning. Yeah. It's the way she describes it is kind of dark and primal versus at Riverrun where she grew up. It's bright and airy. Yeah. It's more park-like. It sounds like.
But I'm guessing that was always the case. I'm guessing that that's not just a function of the replacement of the old religions with the new. I'm guessing that the further south you go, the area the Godswoods were. It was probably always been the case.
Yes, the North does seem like a rather dark and primal place.
Exactly.
In general. Yeah.
So we got a little bit about the faith, that it was there's a sort of a seven-headed trinity,
right?
Heptinity. I'm not sure what the word would be for that.
You're the math guy. You tell me.
It sounds a little bit like sort of Christianity, sort of like she was baptized with oils and water, and the description of a sept sounds a little bit like a church.
Yeah, it definitely comes across that way. Whereas Ned, he believes in the old gods, which predate the faith.
Be a funny name for them if they didn't.
Yes, it would.
And so, I mean, I think there's a sort of a parallel here to the sort of coming of Christianity to Britain, because Britain had a lot of sort of pagan sort of like worship of, the land and sort of the energy of the land, and a lot of that was kind of supplanted by when Christianity came along. So I think there are similarities between those two events. Being British, I always sort of see Britishness in fantasy. I don't know why.
Well, I think there's a reason why, even though these characters are Westerosi, they speak with a British accent. They don't need to. They can speak with any kind of accent.
You're reading a book with a British accent. It's just a book. It doesn't say in the book that they've got a British accent.
I guess I'm referring to the TV show.
You are a little bit, I think, yeah.
But we get a little more of Ned. Yeah. We continue, chapter 1, we got some of Ned's character. We're getting a little more in this chapter. It's clearly he's affected by taking a man's life, and he's come to the Godswood to cleanse himself and do some soul searching. He's compelled by his rank and role to do the things that he has to do, whether he likes them or not.
Yeah. And it's, I think that, like you say, that's a continuation of what we learned from him, that he doesn't take any pleasure in those aspects of his job.
Right, yeah. As I got to this part in the chapter, it immediately struck me when Catelyn said he thinks of me first, even though he just found out that Jon Arryn has died. His first statement is, "What? How are you? And what about your sister and the boy?" I think he calls Robert Arryn.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Yeah,
I think we can conclude that. I like the. Coming back to the sort of Godswoods a little bit, I like the depth of the story that I think she says at one point that the loam on the ground in the Godswoods is 10,000 in the Winterfell Godswood is 10,000 years old, and it saw the walls of Winterfell grow around it. I kind of like that.
Yeah, that's a good image.
Yeah,
very good imagery.
Yeah.
You get by the way she describes things, kind of her mindset about the North and Winterfell in particular. The gloomy castle grew around it, and the ancient weirwood brooded over a small pond. 1,000 blood-stained hands in reference to the leaves of the weirwood.
She's not a big fan, is she?
She doesn't. She doesn't seem to relate very well.
And so the central weirwood has a carved face, and so it's known as the heart tree. And the carving of the face is supposed to predate the first men, basically.
Right.
It's supposed to be thousands of years old.
They were created. Those faces were created by the children of the forest.
Yeah. So the main religion that Catelyn is part of, the new gods, are the 7 gods of equal footing that represent basically the stages of life. I like the mention of rainbows because, of course, if you've got a 7-headed god, a rainbow is a natural.
Right.
7 colours in the rainbow.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. The one thing that's a little bit interesting to me is, if you look at the history of religion in Europe, it's interesting that there doesn't seem to be a strong push to enforce the new religion as the religion.
Yeah.
It's clearly there. There's clearly an undertone of it. You sort of you feel that Catelyn looks down on the Starks just a little bit for still believing in the old gods. Not in a mean way. Just she thinks that they're a little bit out of touch with the prevailing winds. But there doesn't seem to be. There seems to be at least a degree of toleration for still believing in the old gods.
She definitely makes it. At least it comes across that everywhere but the North.
Yeah.
The 7, the faith of the 7 are the gods to be worshipped. She mentions the weirwood trees haven't been cut down or burnt out everywhere but in the North, basically. Yeah.
Just historically, what I think. I'm not going to say this is going to happen in the books, but I think historically, when a new religion comes along and gains traction, particularly with the ruling classes, they tend to enforce that. They tend to, certainly in sort of medieval times, like we're talking about, equivalent of medieval times, you will expect at some point they would use that religion as a means of control of the people.
Sure.
And they would say that your worship of anything else is, not permitted anymore, and that leads to people having their sort of underground services to remember the gods that they still believe in.
Yeah, but only takes one king or one monarch to make such a claim, and So, the main point of this whole chapter, though, is that Jon Arryn is dead.
Yeah, that's pretty much the conclusion.
And
at least for Jon Arryn, anyway.
Right. That's what he mostly is concerned about. And we learn about Ned and King Robert being fostered together almost like brothers growing up under Jon Arryn in the Vale. And we learn about how Arryn rebelled against the prior king, King Aerys II Targaryen. Rather than give up the boys, he called his banners, rallied the troops, and defended the boys against the
Do we know how old Ned and Robert were at that time?
I don't. I don't.
I think I got the feeling that they were sort of like around 16, 17. Yeah. That's what I was thinking they were, but I too am not 100% sure about that. Just calling them boys. If you think about it, we were talking about Jon and Rob last week, and they're only 14, and I'm tempted to think of them as grown-ups.
Right.
So
yeah, that's true. Yeah, they were probably mid to late teenagers.
Yeah, that's what
that
I
would
think
be my guess. Shortly, right at the same time, in fact, that Ned and Catelyn married. Jon Arryn married Catelyn's sister, Lysa.
Yeah, so it's slightly strange.
So,
Your foster father becomes your brother-in-law.
Yes.
Okay, that's reasonable. And so Lysa and Robert,
Yes.
have retreated to the Eyrie, the seat of the Vale,
Right.
with no great explanation of why they've left King's Landing.
Right. I don't know if that's intentionally vague or what, but we do know that Catelyn's uncle Brendan, which is also Lysa's uncle Brendan, is watching over Lysa. But we get the idea from Catelyn that he's not exactly gonna snuggle with her, warm, fuzzy kind of guy. He's
so he's
a knight.
Yeah, he's Hoster Tully, which is Catelyn and Lysa's father's brother.
Yes,
right?
he's Hoster Tully's younger brother.
Right. Yeah, so the king's on his way, so Ned sends
He
for
is.
his brother Ben from the Night's Watch, and I'd just like to point out that is a little bit unfair.
It is.
Garrett was really scared and he ran away and
Yeah.
he got his head chopped off, but Ben gets to swan down to Winterfell whenever he feels like for a
Right.
feast and a who knows what else. Who knows how many of his vows he
there's
gets
a
to break.
Good meal. I think. I'm tired
And it's not
of
so
all this,
cold down there either.
Salted pork. Let's go have a nice meal. And we get a little more info about the Night's Watch.
You've liked talking about the Night's Watch, haven't you?
do. I like the Night's
I know
Watch.
you do.
They're short-staffed.
Oh, plagues us all.
They're becoming shorter and shorter staffed. Desertions are increasing and deaths while ranging. And we get another reference to Mance Rayder. I guess there's some debate. Is he to blame for the deaths and desertions, or is there something else? We did read the prologue, so we know there.
If only these people were reading the book, they would know what was going on.
We know that at least two people. Well, three people died. Two died at the hands of the other.
Yeah.
One deserted and then died at the hands of Ned.
Yes. So, so we've talked about this quite a bit. That to me, the threat of Mance Rayder would not make me run away from the wall anytime soon. It's got to be something more existentially terrifying, especially if you're an old hand like Garrett was.
Yeah.
It's interesting that Ned plays down the supernatural aspects of why people are deserting, why so many people are getting killed north of the wall. And, in fact, Catelyn is superstitious about the things that might be up there, and Ned is completely... So either, and I have an opinion on this, he is...
It's a good one.
No, it's not necessarily. Either he is protecting her from what he has learned, or he didn't learn it and or completely disbelieves it anyway.
Right. We don't know which it is, but you have an opinion.
Well, yeah, I think it's the latter. He simply doesn't think that it's true.
He doesn't seem like the kind of guy that would buy into fairy tales
and
stuff.
But at the same time, just read the prologue. I mean, there's no guy. But the thing about that is, I'm with you. I'm like Ned. I'm a man of science. I would not buy into the fairy tales, apart from the fact that Gary ran away from the wall in a state of genuine terror.
Yes.
And I mean, that wall is really high. That would do it for me. I mean, I'd be out of there day one. Just looking over the edge would be enough. So something's put the fear into him, and if he was protecting Cat from the worries about the White Walkers and that, he wouldn't have mentioned the fact that something had put the fear into Garrett. He did say that as if, it must have been the weevils in the biscuits of the wall or something like that.
Something put the fear in him.
So either he's just being a bit dim at this point, Ned, or he just simply doesn't believe that this could happen, and so he's poo-pooing the whole thing.
Right. Very good point. And of course, Cat's point to him is, well, you just saw a direwolf, and nobody had seen that in hundreds of years either. So
evidence in the prologue, evidence in chapter 1 even.
I think Ned's just turning a blind eye to this whole thing, really.
Yeah. It reminds me of there was a comedy show in England where they were talking about You know the end of Planet of the Apes? Spoiler alert for Planet of the Apes. He discovers that it's Earth because he sees the Statue of Liberty.
Yes.
Because it's Charlton Heston, the joke was that he just doesn't believe it. Even when presented with the overwhelming levels of evidence, he just ignores it. Including, he's walking along the beach and the monkey starts singing, "This is Planet Earth." Ned is like that.
Right.
He's like,
It's not happening.
None of this is really happening.
This cannot be real.
Yeah.
But Ned gets some good news. He gets cheered up a little bit.
He does, yeah. He's definitely happier about life once he hears that Robert's coming.
Yes, his old friend is coming to see him, and that lifts his spirits a little bit. Unfortunately, Catelyn cannot share in the excitement because she can only think about the dead direwolf and the antler in the throat, which we will talk more about in a little bit. So, But Ned's excited, at least.
But it's tempered by the fact that he's obviously not very fond of the Queen.
Doesn't
Cersei.
seem to be. That Lannister woman, I think, is how he...
Lannister woman, sorry. And her family, the Lannisters, partly, I think, because they were late in joining Robert's cause in the rebellion that put Robert on the throne.
Yeah.
And they said when victory was all but certain. That does seem like a good time to join in,
That
frankly.
is, yeah.
So we learn that Robert and Cersei have children. We've only heard about Tommen, the youngest, who's 7 years old.
And the same age as Bran.
That's right.
And it's interestingly enough, we get just a little inkling that the Starks are different than most of the other houses. Catelyn goes on a bit about how most houses' words are some sort of boast or some sort of truth, and the Starks is just winter is coming.
Yeah.
And
it probably dominates your thoughts up in the north.
Yeah.
The fact that winter's coming.
Does it ever leave? You know, we got Above the Rest, which we talked about in Chapter 1 for the Mallisters, and the Baratheons is, ours is the Fury.
I like that one.
Yeah, that's is an interesting one. Yep. And the Starks are just, winter is coming. So maybe that has to do with, the fact that the Starks were once kings, and, heavy is the head that wears the crown. They're just like, winter is coming.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Still, though, it's not really rousing, is it?
No.
As a speech.
You're not going to...
as I say one more time,
the troops.
Winter is coming. Yeah, we know. All right, so comparison with the television show. Again, it's very close.
It's pretty close.
Yeah, all of this was captured in the TV show. The news of Jon Arryn's death was interspersed with some footage of Jon Arryn's body lying in state in King's Landing.
You can do that with television.
Well, you can.
Yeah.
The Lannisters were seen discussing his demise.
Right.
The thing we wanted to talk about was the symbolism of the direwolf being killed by the stag's antler. That happens in the book. It happens in the TV show. But in the TV show, they also find the dead stag.
Right.
And that is a slight difference.
It is. It's an important difference.
Yeah, potentially.
It's slight, but it can mean more. It can mean a lot more.
Yeah. So what is Catelyn afraid of in the book? Well, she knows that the direwolf died because of a stag. The symbol of the Baratheons, who are on their way, is the stag.
Yeah. But in the TV show, it's more of a sense of, if the Starks try to destroy the Baratheons, they themselves will perish, which is
right, because this direwolf died killing a stag.
Yeah. Right. So we're reading the book, so we'll go with the book. But that is an interesting difference.
Yeah,
they might not have even thought, when they were writing that scene, they just probably thought is much more.
Where did that thing come from? We need a dead stag because there's an antler in his throat. Yeah, in her throat, I should say. So some background, again, avoiding spoilers. The children of the forest are said to predate, somewhat ironically, the first men.
Right.
The first men came across the narrow sea from Essos to Westeros, roughly 8 to 12,000 years ago, known as the Dawn Age.
Right.
The children are not human per se. They are humanoid, but not human, and they are the original inhabitants of Westeros.
Yeah, there's special green seers were children of the forest that had the ability to see through the eyes of the weirwood, and because weirwoods live for so long, they can see both the future and the past when looking through those eyes.
They have to be right in front of them.
Right.
Because they can't turn at all. But so that wasn't all the children, that was just special.
Right, yes.
Okay.
Green seers, they were called, yes. But when the first men did arrive on Westeros, there was many a battle for thousands of years. The first men and the children of the forest warred until they agreed on a pact on the Isle of Faces, which Catelyn mentions in this chapter, I believe. She says, that's one place where the weirwood trees still stand. And the pact was that the children get the forest, which is suitable for their name, and the first men get the open lands.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's where the first men learned about the old gods, was through the children of the forest.
So the old gods predate the first men. They are the gods of the children of the forest.
Right.
Interesting.
So, ice?
I feel like we talked about ice last week.
We talked about Valerian.
We talked about the steel.
Valerian steel versus magic forged steel versus castle forged steel.
I hear you.
Ice is a good example of Valerian steel.
Ned's sword ice was forged in Valyria before the Doom of Valyria, more than 400 years ago. The Doom of Valyria, I think, is something akin to. What's the name of the lost island that sank into the Atlantic? Atlantis.
Yes.
I'm blanked on the word Atlantis. Yes, something akin to that, and it's a stark relic from when they were kings, not just lords.
Right. Yeah, it's a very big sword.
Yeah.
He mentions it's like, I think Bran mentions in chapter 1 that it's like almost as tall as Ned or something like that. I could be making that up.
But again, Valyrian steel is lighter.
Right.
So perhaps you can swing that thing around. We get a little bit of geography. The Trident is the name of the large river in the Riverlands, so called because it has three main tributaries, green, blue, and red. The Tullys are the lords of the Riverlands. Hoster Tully's title is the Lord Paramount of the Trident.
Oh, that's a very fancy name.
It dominates the topography of that region.
Crossing it can become a problem, especially in
militarily
spots.
Important thing to be able to do.
Yes, and we also learn a little bit about the Targaryens. They are the previous royal family. Their sigil is a three-headed red dragon on a black background, and their words are fire and blood.
See, that's more like it.
Yes.
Yeah, that's no winter is coming right there.
You see those words, you're thinking, I'm not going to mess with these people. Winter
These guys are just going to wait for us to get cold.
They have been displaced by the current king, Robert Baratheon, the first of his name, and the Targaryens lived in King's Landing prior to being unseated by Robert's rebellion.
Yeah. In Pedantry Corner, I'm hugely disappointed to report that I got nothing this week.
Well,
the editors improved as time went by, it seems.
It changed.
There'll be more,
maybe.
I'm sure.
Yeah. So, what do you think?
Oh, I loved it. I mean, in not very much time, again, just like painting this. I was thinking about the way the book is constructed earlier, and I was I have an English-American difference here to talk about. Because I was thinking that these early chapters are the warp of the tapestry that is being woven here.
Right.
They're the warp, and we're going to, as time goes by, we're going to pass that shuttle back and forth to create what in England we would call the weft.
Whoa! Wow.
But in the United States, you call it the woof, right? The woof and the wolf and the warp. Michelle's looking at me blankly.
I don't know what you're talking about.
So when you weave cloth, you have
I do have a knowledge gap in weaving.
Vertical strands,
okay,
and they're the warp, and then the horizontal strands that go through them are the weft or the woof.
Now I get what you're.
See the analogy,
the imagery you're making.
So these early chapters are the pillars,
right,
basically, and then they're going to be sort of like things going through
storylines
intertwines all this.
Right. Okay. Yes.
And I think it's a very nice way to do it. Actually.
Yeah. He's a pretty good writer, that George.
Yeah. Not too bad.
I think he knows what he's doing. Yeah. It just we're each chapter so far gets a little bit more interesting, sucks you in a little further. We got the idea of a newer religion supplanting an old one. That's a great facet of creating a story, and seems to have a hallmark of the spread of Christianity into Britain, which you have already mentioned.
Yeah, I really like the sense of the faith being sort of officially sanctioned, but not yet. It's not yet shameful or frowned upon. Still believing the old gods, but the Starks are sailing against the wind a little bit by still believing in them.
Yeah. And we get some really nice moments, really sweet moments between Catelyn and Ned.
Yeah.
It's pretty clear that their love is a rock and it allows Catelyn to live in the...
We might need a new section for sort of softness here, 'cause this is, it's all touchy-feely.
Right. I think Catelyn, I don't know.
You see, I want to say Catelyn,
Me too.
but I also want to contract it to Cat.
And that's her nickname is Cat.
Yeah, so then that makes you want to say Catelyn.
Right.
But I want to say Catelyn. So we're going with Catelyn and Cat, right?
Sure, we'll do Catelyn and Cat.
Catelyn and Cat.
But I think Cat's love for Ned, which Ned is Eddard. I think does she call him Ned in this chapter?
She does, I think. I think I saw the first episode.
All right, so Ned is the nickname for Eddard.
Yeah.
Clearly, she's not in love with Winterfell or the North.
Not massively, no.
No, but her love for Ned allows her to overlook some of the issues she has with the area.
All right, I think that's about it, right?
Yeah.
All right.
I think we've covered most of the important things that we could cover in this chapter.
Yeah. So please subscribe if you're enjoying our little podcast.
Yes, please do. And also, we'd love to hear from you. You could reach us at ghosts.harrenhell@gmail.com. That's ghosts plural.
Okay, thanks a million. Until next time.
Bye.